Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and yesterday, one of my best friends on YouTube and in my personal life, Mama Max, has uploaded a video called Pick a Side YouTube, where he covers a 30-minute, sort of expose. Me included was in this video, a bunch of other YouTubers, some of my best friends, Nexpo, Nix Crowley, all these people, us four were homies, we ride or die in this case. This was a situation that unfortunately we are all too familiar with. So let's get started real quickly. In this video, Mama Max was discussing a video he had produced, okay? A video by the name of "He abused hundreds of underage girls on IMVU. This is what happened to him." So IMVU is a social playground everyone gets into and people interact with one another. Now, he had received a strike based on the sex and nudity policy, where I guess Mama Max had showcased a bit too much revealing skin than what was actually allowed by YouTube systems. Now, to get things going, okay, edgier content on YouTube has unfortunately faced much more scrutiny in the last year than it ever has before. In 2019-2020, I loved covering this kind of content. Unfortunately, alright, as 2021 came by, and even 2022, where I had planned to have a lot more darker content, like I had back in 2019, will face a lot more review by my perspective, okay? This kind of content, because of how YouTube's shifting to a much more family-friendly, much more corporate-friendly environment, making content like that, unfortunately, will lead you to not only be demonetized, which is probably not even that important, at least in my opinion, but what really scares me is the age restrictions and the potential for having channel strikes attributed because of darker content you may cover. If you ever look at content that I make covering this kind of dark stuff, I censor a lot of stuff. I put blurs up the ass. I am very liberally applying blurs all over the screen, simply because I don't want to get a channel strike for covering this kind of content. I like covering this content, but if I cover this content and I don't cover every single basis, I face a channel strike. And at that point, if I upload something that is blatantly against YouTube TOS, I can't complain. I broke the rules. It is what it is. Which is why every time I edit a video like this, I scrub through the timeline. Not once, not twice, not three, sometimes up to 10 fucking times. That's how insane it's gotten to cover this kind of stuff. And even when you get demonetized for covering risque content, it baffles me because YouTube is one of the only places where that actually ever really happens to this degree. A lot of news organizations, even on YouTube, will cover dark, very, very advertiser-unfriendly material. Yet, they don't necessarily face the same demonetization that everyone gets. I personally believe anybody that uploads content to YouTube, if you upload advertiser-unfriendly material, if YouTube is going to yellow dolan everyone, they should do it across the board, regardless of channel size, regardless of how much traction or whatever the channel's identity is, whether they're mainstream news or they're independent news. Or if you're going to monetize one side, you should monetize everyone, okay? Either it's advertiser-unfriendly for everyone, or it isn't. But we're going to get to this in a little bit. Max uploaded this video and he had received a strike. He appealed the strike. The appeal basically just got rejected within minutes, from what I understand. This doesn't shock me. Back in the day when I covered the Cash App scam, that video was up doing just fine. One day I received a channel strike and I didn't understand why, to be honest. I didn't promote the scam. I didn't talk about people go. In fact, I educated people to not fall for the scam. Now, we all know that YouTube is primarily monitored, mostly from what it seems, with machine learning algorithms. There's simply so much content uploaded to this website that to have human beings sitting around watching every hour of uploaded content is literally almost impossible to do, okay? So when you have machine learning systems, I want you to think of it like this. When a video is uploaded and completely processed through the system, it is constantly being updated with newer features. Features such as transcripting, which allows YouTube to get sort of a play-by-play of what each word is being spoken in a video. So in this transcript, I believe, from at least what I am speculating right now, YouTube will look through this transcript, find a bunch of trigger words, or find a bunch of strings that maybe are not exactly aligned with a creator-friendly video, or sorry, an advertiser-friendly video. And I guess if more strings are detected, or maybe a video is flagged, and a combination of various factors, a strike can be attributed. Now, of course, YouTube does offer an appeal system. However, the appeal system, like I said earlier, in my case, I literally told them to appeal a 15 to 20 minute video. They did it within a minute. It was obviously nonsensical. Now, again, YouTube, at least the support side, seems to have like a humiliation fetish. So if you have a large enough platform and are able to reach them out there enough to gain some level of attention, you may be able to get this strike overturned. Of course, especially if it's a false nonsense strike to begin with. But even then, that requires that you have a very established audience off platform rather than one right here, and that of course needs to be readjusted. Now remember, if YouTube applies a strike to you because you happen to leak personal information, or you did in fact show a nude, like a buttock for whatever reason, then again, it's entirely a strike that can be valid. Now that's not to, of course, discount the fact that YouTube does in fact have nudity on its platform. For instance, if you type in naked yoga or anything of that nature, you will find videos on YouTube, of course, definitely age restricted for the most part, containing actual nude material. Again, the difference is what is considered sexually charged and what isn't. Now, of course, back to the entire idea of strikes being applied, there are plenty of other creators that have faced similar issues. So let's go down the gauntlet. For instance, back then, Super Mario T, which is a good example to bring here, had uploaded a Smash Brothers Yoshi montage, where they uploaded years ago. They had actually gotten it striked because they were glorifying criminal organizations. And when you get a channel strike for glorifying a criminal organization, in some cases, YouTube will outright deny you from the partner program. Why? Well, because way back when the adpocalypses happened, this was actually one of the biggest issues YouTube had faced. A lot of people would upload terrorist content, sometimes have it advertisers running on it, and YouTube was then thrown under the bus. They had to immediately react this way or face more public scrutiny. Unfortunately, because YouTube is one of the largest video sharing websites, every time a PR crisis happens, their response is incredibly heavy-handed, sometimes more than anyone would hope. So let's talk about things like monetization and like what happens with the YouTube side, okay? Now, when I make content, like I told you, I blur everything. I blur as much as I really have to. Sometimes I overextend the blurs. And the reality is, if I give away personal information, or let's say I'm covering something that does involve nude material in it, I have to censor every single aspect. If I show any nude at all, regardless sometimes of even how censored it is, I face channel strikes. So let's look at some of my videos. This is What is Trafficking Hub? The Trafficking Hub investigation. Back then, I'd done an entire investigation, an hour and 11 minutes, into actually looking into what was the Trafficking Hub hubaloo. So basically on Pornhub or X videos and plenty of adult websites, there would be cases of underage material uploaded. And there was an entire group, I forget their name exactly, but it was a religious organization, Exodus Cry, that jumped in, basically started this whole campaign. And really, I made a whole video where I wasn't really taking a side. I did an impartial investigation and looked at a whole heck of a lot of controversies centered around adult media and how it's shared around. So when I made this video, it really didn't have any single issue. However, very recently, it started to actually get an age restriction. So YouTube demonetized the video, which of course they did. I mean, I literally said you should demonetize the video. I told them it contained heavy material. This video was never monetized to begin with. But when I released it, it really didn't get into search algorithms whatsoever. Maybe it was because it was genuinely dark material, for sure. But when I recently looked into the video, they actually age restricted it. Now, I could appeal this, but frankly, I don't think that the appeal is going to go through simply because the stuff that I covered in this video wasn't okay. It was definitely 18 plus. That one I can definitely confirm to you. Now, of course, if we go further into the situation, you can find out that I made other videos like Disney needs to shut down this Club Penguin server, where I covered an actual predator that existed on Club Penguin, a really nasty predator on the Club Penguin private servers. Me and another YouTuber by the name of Kavos actually sat down and covered this on our own independent channels. We had literally been sitting together for days talking to each other about this situation. It was shortly after when we both made our videos and they blew up, Disney stepped in and shut down a lot of these private servers where these kids were actually getting groomed by really sick adults who were operating these servers to begin with. Now, if you look at YouTube's idea of it, despite me covering this video for 42 minutes, censoring basically every single aspect of privacy complaint bullshit where I could potentially have leaked somebody's address, down to images, even interview segments I had to bleep out, YouTube had looked at that video and monetized it after they had manually reviewed the entire thing. Even though I had went into it and said, you know, maybe this isn't advertiser friendly whatsoever. So I want to say that YouTube isn't totally against the content. So obviously from that example, I want to prove that YouTube is not against this type of darker content that may even target people that are predatory. You know, I think it's good to make content on people that are predators, bringing this information to light so that people can be more aware of it and a problem can be rectified legally and, you know, just in every regard, okay, from an okay manner. If there's a problem going on YouTube, raising awareness to it and giving YouTube the idea is better to help self-police this content. But generally, when you do cover this content, It is a TOS minefield. Allow me to explain. I censor a lot of it, right? If I don't censor things like personally identifiable names when I'm covering a predator, for instance, like that Club Penguin video, if I left a first name, last name, IP address, phone address, home address, email address, whatever kind of address, any piece of information, any shred of info that could tie back to a personally identifiable individual, I can face an actual channel strike based on possibly the harassment and cyberbullying guidelines, and I may have the video taken down for a privacy complaint in general. So that's why I play it really safe when it comes to uploading this content, because nobody wants to work this hard on this kind of a video, produce it, upload it to spread a decent message or to help stop an actual criminal action or to stop, an actual negative action and then face a strike on your end, simply because the content you uploaded technically violates terms of service. Now, again, it may seem like YouTube is going out of their way to protect predators whenever somebody's channel gets striked like this. And unfortunately, the grim reality of it is, like we talked about earlier with machine learning algos and whatnot, when you produce this content, if you don't follow the TOS 1000%, you do unfortunately face channel strikes. It's frustrating. I understand it's frustrating. And it's one of the reasons why this kind of content, when I cover it, while I have the best of intentions, it is the most stressful kind of content to cover. And nothing is more evident than the next example in this entire video. This is another video that I made called "There is a TikTok cat killer right now." This is by far the one video that almost made me quit YouTube. Not necessarily because of the content within it, obviously I've seen far worse, but because of the stress that I had to go through around the time period this video came out. It blew up, it absolutely reached like 1 million views within like a day or two, which is big. And it covered an individual who is known as the Crazy Cat Killer, a lady that was basically killing cats on Omegle, spreading around on TikTok, having a good time, basically just being a degenerate. Now, around this moment, there was a massive documentary released on Netflix titled something along the lines of, God, it's escaping my head. Don't Fuck with Cats. Yeah, basically it was an interview. It was basically a documentary where like people had like got together and covered the exploits of Canadian serial killer Luca Magnotta, who was initially killing dogs, and then he moved on to like killing a human. Maybe one more, I'm not entirely sure. That person's arrested and gone. It was a huge deal. Guy had a fucking Interpol red warrant out on him. Dude was arrested in Berlin, extradited back to Canada, and it was a wild story. Now, obviously because of how popular that was on Netflix, a lot of people who were investigating jumped onto this trend, and that's what initiated a lot of this mob justice, if you will. People had taken matters into their own hand, they were trying to identify this individual, and they found them literally within hours. Honestly, around this moment, this person, from what I understood, was having a crisis. Obviously they were the scrutiny of internet detectives all over, and I didn't want this person to do anything regarding harming themselves, and this is where I was completely stressed out to no end. Luckily, nothing bad really happened out of it. In fact, the law enforcement got involved. In fact, the FBI jumped into it, and they actually busted this individual, took them to prison, and now they actually were sentenced to 30 months in an animal-crushing case. So this was a serious deal, okay? It was a completely serious situation, and frankly, the cops actually got involved, and they arrested the individual. Now, if you go to YouTube's situation, when I made this video, I had told YouTube that this video contained severe real injury, real death, because obviously, animals died. Even if I blurred it, the animals still fucking died. Harm to minors or abuse of animals, obviously. Depictions of discussions of sexual abuse or domestic violence. Edited video gameplay that primarily focuses on graphic violence. So I demonetized the video. I didn't care about making a dime. YouTube disagreed with that. They said, the video has mild violence, injury without showing blood or graphic content, dramatized violence as part of animation, comedy, drama, or music videos, violence that occurs as part of unedited video gameplay. So even the video gameplay, they have different focuses. Like if you play games like Manhunt, obviously that's not video game friendly for advertisers, whereas, I don't know, something like Call of Duty might be much more tame. Anyways, the point is, YouTube was on my side for some of these videos, despite me saying that probably isn't the smart choice, okay? It wasn't advertiser friendly in my opinion. YouTube disagreed. Now, there's a few things that I find a little bit questionable, at least from my end on YouTube, and some of it is the tweeting from last night and really honestly for a couple days ago, where Max said appeal denied immediately. I'm giving you the opportunity now to resolve this peacefully at Team YouTube. Where I think it gets kind of a little questionable a little bit is the constant tweeting and tagging of various other figures on the internet. And of course, I understand the idea over here. I understand the concept of, hey, listen, we got to get more eyes onto this moment. But when you post something with the words children or pedophiles, it tends to really elicit, in my opinion, a very emotional response in this entire situation. And look, at the end of the day, I understand what Max is going for. He doesn't have a malicious angle in any of this. This is a close friend of mine. I know him from a personal level. And the reality of it is, the way that this is framed definitely incites a lot of emotional response from the people jumping in. And there's no reason, there's no doubt that there's going to be people who look at this and think it's just a little bit heavy-handed. I can get that whole angle. So one other point of contention that I have in this video is this is a slide that played just before Max had a giant collaboration smorgasbord in his video, where this one part where they also, referencing the actual creators involved, don't exactly know what I intend to do with this video, so all accountability and any consequence that this video may cause should fall upon me and me alone. Now, the reason why this gets to me a little bit is that if you're going to have this many people, and remember, I walked into this, I knew what Max was going to do with my video segment. This is why I participated. I trust Max with the content that he makes, and I know what he was doing. But if you involve anybody in your content, you need to give them the A to Z of what it is that you're uploading. You don't want to have any awkward situation where somebody gives you their likeness, and they may not know exactly what it's being used for. It's just, I think it's a much more professional scenario. Then again, when you are collaborating with 50 people, maybe I can sort of understand that situation. Now, that being said, though, I hate the fact that the discourse around this is conflating to the entire idea of, like, you know, children versus pedophile. YouTube, which side are you picking? The reality of this is that the content that is being produced in this manner, and Max makes stylized content. If you're a fan of the game Hotline Miami, you're going to love his channel, okay? But if you play Hotline Miami, you know that necessarily expressing negative people, even in the world of the internet sphere that we have, in that style, may necessarily not be as friendly as it could be with YouTube's TOS systems imaginable. So again, it goes back to the earlier point. The way that the YouTube TOS system works, unfortunately, people who have the best of intentions in basically exposing really negative shit to public light ultimately face some issues in terms of having themselves striked. And it doesn't just stick around to the pedophile stuff too. It can go even further into like other aspects of negative content on the internet. People who may be animal abusers, for instance, who make fake rescue channels, may ultimately be exposed to some level of harassment or cyberbullying if somebody chooses to cover them. Obviously, again, these are emotionally charged subjects. Every time you cover something like this, there's always going to be people that just go extremely into the situation. Like the cat killer video that I talked about earlier, as soon as you cover something as sensitive as animal abuse or really any kind of abuse, people jump in, and there's a lot of vigilantism that kicks in, and some people go above and beyond where they really should be. Now, again, I trust the content that Max makes. I watch a lot of the videos that he himself gets striked on. And even in my case, I have a hard time really pinpointing what time code would really go against YouTube systems. Again, it's just a bad situation all around. And even if you have the best of intentions, if you don't follow the TOS 100,000%, you yourself can be on the chopping block instead of those who, in my opinion, deserve it a lot more, especially on this platform, and really any platform to begin with. For YouTube, it's not that edgy content is wrong, it's just some people's portrayal and coverage of edgy content may cross some TOS situations that frankly shouldn't have happened. Now, for instance, Max isn't the only one that covers content. He makes good content, but there are other people that cover predator content. In fact, there's a whole market of it on YouTube. One of them is People vs. Pred, a pretty small channel, but the only reason I'm talking about this is literally 3 weeks ago, they had actually caught one of the executives at PlayStation Network. Now, you might be wondering, oh, Muda, what's up with the big goddamn blur today? The reality is while this content has existed for weeks, months on YouTube, in fact, there's probably near 100-something episodes, I can't show you a single image because, frankly, you're looking at the actual face of the person that is being accused, and in certain cases, these titles actually have first names in them. Now, of course, while this channel exists with this content, I'm not going to show it on my channel simply because if the YouTube moderation comes in and says, I'm leaking possibly personally identifiable information, like a first name, for instance, or I'm showing somebody's face, especially on accusations like this that are so heavily and emotionally charged, I may get the strike. This channel may not get a strike. I may get the strike on my channel. It's something that most YouTubers who operate in this sphere know well enough. Sometimes content can exist untouched on YouTube, but the moment it is reprinted on somebody else's page is the moment you may choose to get a strike right there. For people who cover things like, for instance, medical stuff where we're talking about, COVID-19, if you cover medical information or you react to TikTok, which YouTube would deem misinformation, even playing it on your channel and literally reacting to it, even if you're trying to expose the facts, may end up getting your channel striked for things like medical misinformation, simply because you played the platform and ran it on your own channel. Again, the system itself is so finicky and fucked, and there's such a heavy course of machine learning being used that genuine discourse, genuine discussion, and sometimes coverage of content really is a double-edged sword. It can absolutely backfire on people even with the best of intentions, which in a lot of my friend Mama Max's case, this is something that I see. In fact, a lot of people covering darker content who suffer this stuff typically face it because they weren't exactly 1000% careful with the content that they posted. It's aggravating, yes, but that's unfortunately the system we operate in right now. Now, Max was taken down for a lot of things regarding YouTube's TOS. For instance, he was taken down for the sex and nudity content policies. So from what I understand, he might have shown something a little too risque. Now, of course, if you're posting content, you definitely don't want to show any content regarding genitals, breasts, or buttocks for the purpose of sexual gratification. So to understand what they mean by that is if you're actually uploading adult material like pornography, that's like you're done. You're getting a strike or your channel is being terminated. However, if you do naked yoga, for some reason, because it's not sexually gratifying, because it's just an exercise, that's okay. That's fine. You can upload that to YouTube, and for some reason it'll be age restricted most likely, but it can show up on YouTube. Of course, you've got things like pornography or sexual acts, which immediately do get removed. Now, of course, other content that violates the policy. Explicit or implied depictions of sex act for the purpose of sexual gratification. So, dramatize things like sex scenes, video games, or music. If you upload literal porn games, you're probably going to get a strike. Masturbation, all this kind of stuff. It's all listed right here. If you talk about incest or promote incest, for instance, you definitely get removed. You want to promote things like bestiality? That's a strike right there. So, of course, YouTube has it all laid out right there, ready to go. Of course, they even talk about content that can be age restricted. Sometimes, if the video invites sexual activity, such as by kissing, or provocative dancing, twerking, or fondling. And remember, these are not complete lists either. If you have something even more degenerate than what's written on here, chances are you face channel strikes. So that's, of course, the crux of what's happened with Max, okay? Max, unfortunately, from what I understand, has uploaded some content that, frankly, has incited sexual gratification, even though he didn't intend to. Now, to understand, people who upload content, like especially what I showed you earlier with like people versus pred, this is where you fall into things like harassment and cyberbullying. So, for instance, if you upload content on YouTube and you focus on a specific individual, you have to make sure you do not incite harassment from your video. In every single video I make, I always introduce a disclaimer where I tell you don't harass people. I even mention it in the video all the time. If I cover somebody, do not harass them. I strictly cover things in internet culture for the sake of covering them. I don't want anybody to face any repercussion from my coverage on them. So, of course, if you look at the harassment guideline real quick, content that features, so again, when you're posting content, you don't want to feature things that have prolonged name calling or malicious insults, such as racial slurs based on intrinsic attributes, shit you can't change. This includes your protected group status, your physical attributes, and their status as a survivor of sexual assault, domestic abuse, child abuse, and more. Content uploaded with the intent to shame, deceive, or insult a minor. I mean, this is a little bit vague, but if you're going to talk about deceiving a minor, is selling them like fake Robux also deceiving the minor? I don't know. It seems like when you get to vague terms like that, these strikes could apply to anyone, but let's go on. So of course, other content where like if you reveal somebody's private information, such as their home address, email address, big no-no. That's not allowed. You can't dox somebody's public information. Of course, if you have widely available public information, such as an official's office phone number or the phone number of a business where they literally put it on google.com, that is okay. That doesn't violate that terms of service. Content that incites others to harass or threaten individuals on or off YouTube. Obviously, content that encourages abusive fan behavior such as doxing, dogpiling, brigading, or off-platform targeting, such as let's go and make fun of that guy on Twitter. That would be a no-no. Content that targets an identifiable individual as part of a harmful conspiracy theory, where the conspiracy theory has been linked to direct threats or violent acts. Content posted by vigilantes restraining or assaulting an identifiable individual. So imagine if one of those predator channels started handcuffing people, that would be striked. Content revealing or mocking the death or serious injury of an identifiable individual. 3 a.m. Ouija board challenge, boys! This motherfucker just died. Let's print some money. I wonder if that falls into it. So yeah, YouTube keeps adding to this list all the time as things start to happen. So you can understand that like this is a very... It's not necessarily overly vague, but there's definitely things you can't do on YouTube. As long as you're not violating these bullet points, you shouldn't necessarily receive a strike. The reason why I use words like vague is that if you do get a strike and you feel like you're on the verge of it, that's where you go to Team YouTube. If you know you absolutely violated something here, there's really no recourse, even with an appeal or call to social media. I think the real discourse here is really focusing on investigatory content and the leash that's around it. You know, investigation and investigatory content on the internet, especially into the darker subcultures and actual problematic stuff, really is a problem on YouTube, because in order to cover it, we again go through such a TOS minefield doing it that for a lot of people it almost becomes a giant stress pit to go into. So again, to tie it all... I feel the discourse is kind of misplaced over here because of the emotional charge segment of this entire topic. When I look at investigation content on YouTube, it seems like it's put on a very, very tight leash, okay? You walk through a TOS minefield. You don't know if the video you uploaded is going to be fine for now, but then 6 months down the road or a year down the road, you may end up getting a strike. YouTube is incredibly inconsistent with that. And investigation content, in my opinion, is great. I love it. I love producing it. I love working with people who make it. But the problem is we upload content over here, and if we don't follow every single thing down to a T, sometimes even if we do follow every single thing down to a T, there's always some one vague piece of time code in the entire content that may end up giving us a channel strike. And while people who are able to be predators operate around on YouTube or many other social media platforms may or may not ever even end up getting a strike to begin with, it seems like the people who end up calling them out are putting themselves at a higher risk than the people actually committing the crime in certain cases. And it's frustrating and aggravating to deal with, and I think that's where the discourse should be headed. When you are making investigatory content on the internet, okay, and you are putting all this effort and time into it, it shouldn't have to be a giant stress pit, especially in certain cases where even on YouTube, there are other larger, more established mainstream sources that are allowed to produce this kind of content and somehow seemingly don't face the same level of scrutiny or issues from the moderation team out there. This is just the general crux of the argument, and from that perspective, when you tie it off and look at it that way, you can understand the frustrations that Max, me, and plenty of other creators in this web actually have. So, okay, let's stop right now. Okay, let's tie things off real quick. I've been going off on tangents a lot, but I have a lot to get off my chest right now. So, when it comes to YouTube and when it comes to the idea of, hey, is this site picking a side between protecting individuals that are predatory? And I feel that if you have predatory issues on your platform, if you have people who are predatory and you have a platform, you should use your platform to call out actual predators on the internet, okay? Simply because when it becomes that big of an issue, it escapes all of us, and then the mainstream media starts picking it up, and then they cover stories, and then the apocalypse happens again. Creators go through issues. When we creators can self-police and call this stuff out long before and have YouTube's attention raised to it, it honestly is, in my opinion, a good thing, because YouTube can see that there's a problem, they'll jump in, they'll hopefully stop as much as they can. When it comes to, again, this content, some of the people that are making it sometimes will go above and beyond with their storytelling or their coverage, where they may unintentionally violate something TOS related. They may reveal personal information. They may show some nude. And in that case, YouTube has to act in favor of a predator. At least that's what it appears to be. It's not that YouTube, I think, is assisting any predators. It's literally because the content that is uploaded may not have been checked or screened hard enough, and YouTube has had to enact its TOS on that content. So, do I assume that Mama Max will get a strike if he re-uploads that IMVU video with the offending material removed? I don't genuinely believe he'll have an issue. But I can see why this is frustrating to Max and really any creator out there that covers content like this. When you're legitimately trying to raise awareness of something bad going on and you in turn get a strike, no doubt it pisses you off. But I just wanted to add my take onto it, my little nuanced belief that this is obviously a big issue. And obviously, I think going forward, YouTube needs to have a better assessment of policing the content that is uploaded generally around, a better method of reviewing the content. Honestly, the review system itself needs a bit of a redesign, because the way that it exists right now, it feels like no human actually watches the content that we post. And when it comes to darker, edgier content, I honestly feel like YouTube should really eat up and allow that content. YouTube is a place where anybody can upload. We literally have YouTube Kids to separate the kiddos from the adults. So why is it that even to this day, edgier content, not even edgy content, but content that's just mature in nature, has to suffer so many issues? Absolutely baffles me. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think about in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts. Actually, I want to actually know everyone's thoughts, especially if you're a creator on this site uploading content. Let me know what you actually think. This is me, Mudahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.